On today's show, going to be joined by a special guest to talk about the way the Clippers turned their season around, the direction in which they're going, and if the Kawhi Leonard era has run its course. Going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. My name is Darian Vaziri, also known as Dime Dropper, and today we're going to be talking about if the Kawhi Leonard era has run its course, the direction in which the Clippers are going, including what they're going to do with the fifth pick, and how they turn their season around, the ins and outs with that, and giving us some more context on all of that. Is joining us yet again. It's been a couple of months, but I think this is his third or fourth time on the show. One of our best beat writers, my guy Joey Linn. Joey, thanks for making the time to talk Clippers again.
It's a pleasure as always, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, let's get right into it, man. It was a really topsy-turvy year. This was what, year 3 or 4 of you being on the beat?
Yeah, 4 officially. So obviously, as you know, I've been covering the Clippers since I was 18 on social media, any outlets that would give me an opportunity to while I was in college. And then was fortunate to start in that 22-23 season or 21-22 season covering the Clippers for Sports Illustrated. And it's been fun, man.
Yeah, so this season was quite the roller coaster ride. Obviously, the one thing you can say about being a Clipper fan is there's never a dull moment, especially in this Ballmer era. It's been every single season with Ballmer has been a winning season. It did not look like it was going to be a winning season. Let me know, because you obviously had a more up close look at this team. What did you feel was the biggest change? Honestly, not just on the court, but first, did you notice any vibe shift off the court? Was the stuff about, when Chris Paul left, the vibes changed? Was that real? What was going on early on in the season that you think changed, or was it just on-court stuff?
Well, we talked about it a little bit early in the season, but for right or for wrong, they really did plan on Bradley Beal being their third option. And as Ty put it, their third best player. And a lot of fans were upset to hear that when he said that. Felt like it was a slight to Zoo. I don't think it was meant that way. But for right or for wrong, that is the mindset that they went into camp with. Obviously, he had only, I think, 5 games played last season. John Collins got off to a really slow start. So I think they underestimated a little bit how differently they were actually playing to start the year than they had been used to in previous seasons. And it just wasn't working. So there were a lot of different things that were going on, but I truly do think most of it was basketball related. They lost a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have lost, and that kind of spirals. That can happen fast to a team, especially a newer group where, you have a couple games where you're up, you let go of the rope a little bit in the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden you get a little bit used to losing. I think that's what they had happened to them early in the season. And, you do got to give Ty some credit for the way he was able to kind of reset the mindset, reset the vibes. Of course, it became a little bit of a running joke as they were trying to, accomplish his, what was the record that he put out there that he wanted them to try to accomplish the rest of the way? It probably off the top.
Yeah, 30. He said we got to go 35 and 20 the rest of the year, and we ended up doing better.
Yeah, that's what it was. I should remember that off the top of my head, but that he put that out there and people laughed at it, but it did become somewhat of kind of like a rallying moment for that group. But I think more importantly than like a specific target was him telling them that we're basically starting at 0-0 again, right? Like, flush what's happened, start over. This is not reflective of the basketball team that we are. And I think, beyond all the CP stuff, beyond, really anything else, that moment was what helped them turn the season around.
Speaking of Bradley Beal, you almost forget that he's still on the roster. What do you think the chances are that he's actually going to be involved in what the Clippers want to do next year, or you think they're going to try to go a different direction?
That's a great question. And, I think it was somewhat, and you hate to say this about injuries because it's incredibly unfortunate, but I do think just circumstantially, it was somewhat of a blessing in disguise that it did create an opportunity for, a guy like Kobe Sanders, who was drafted in the second round, to become part of the rotation. Cam Christie had a moment in the rotation. Jordan Miller really emerged late in the season as a consistent rotation guy. I'm not sure if any of that happens if Bradley Beal is healthy. all season long. Now, you could argue that the best version of Bradley Beal does help the Clippers win more games last season and potentially games next season as well. But when you look at where this team is at, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show about just the Kawhi era, my personal belief is that they do need to lean a little bit further into, the guys that they have internally who may be here 5 years from now, as opposed to 2 years from now. And that goes for whoever they take at number 5. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well. But you look at the field of players, probably going to be a guard unless we're, caught off guard or something. So, you get who they have right now on the roster, who they're going to be potentially adding with a significant asset in that top 5 pick. It's hard to see where Bradley Beal fits into that next season.
Yeah, I agree. It's I don't know if Bradley Beal will. It's not even about that. I don't think he can help the team, but it's probably stunting the growth of somebody younger that we want to get more minutes. Now, Chris Paul is an interesting one because I remember when you were making content before your beat writing days, you were one of the Clipper fans that was a little upset about his exit and some of the things that happened when he was in Houston and Phoenix. What was it like as a kid that grew up watching Lob City to cover Chris Paul? Like, what was it like covering him?
So I'll take you to that pretty surreal day when they kind of rolled out the red carpet for his return, and they had a huge event at Intuit Dome. They've never done that, by the way, since Kawhi and PG. The Clippers don't really do like press conferences for their new players usually. And, part of that is because they haven't had an addition maybe significant enough to do that for. But, usually we're grabbing the new guys, in Vegas in some back hallway at Summer League to talk to them for the first time. Like, they really rolled out the red carpet for Chris. And, it was deserved, right? He's a Clipper legend. And, for me, it was a little bit surreal because, you see the jersey that's on my wall. Like, I grew up on Lob City. That's no secret. And, I got a chance to ask him what it meant to come back here after having really been a huge reason why there even is an Intuit Dome, right? Like, him in that era helped put the Clippers on the map, really did put the Clippers on the map. So that day was surreal for me, getting a chance to ask him questions for the first time. But going back to the other part of your question, I do think not enough people really talked about kind of how nasty that exit was. Like, people say, oh, well, he helped them out by, doing a sign and trade and allowing them to recoup assets, maybe a little bit, but it also allowed him to get that extra year on his contract, right? By, re-signing and getting the sign and trade. So, it wasn't exactly like throwing a Clippers a bone on the way out, the way that I think it got portrayed a little bit. And then obviously that Houston game was nasty, right? Like, for me, a Blake guy growing up, that was disappointing to see. Obviously those are two competitors, but I think it was disappointing and disheartening for fans, and where you saw a little bit of kind of like the first time since he left, a fraction of the fan base really kind of turn on him. But, time heals all wounds. And like, I really enjoyed seeing what he was able to do in Oklahoma City with obviously our guy Shea, right? When he got there, he got that mentorship. I think that was a cool year for Clippers fans. You had Gallo there. Like, I enjoyed that team a lot. And that kind of, won CP back over for me in that particular, season, seeing what he was able to do. And then, you had 2021 and those feelings kind of became complicated again. And then, he ended up doing some good things in Phoenix after that. So it was cool to see him come back. Obviously disappointing the way that it ended. At this point, I think we're all able to look back at it with a little bit of a clearer lens than maybe that night when he posted on his Instagram story and everybody was like, what are the Clippers doing? They just cut him in the middle of the night. I think we all have a little bit more context now. However, I've said this on other podcasts. I think I've even said it on the radio. I do still hold to my initial take on that night that I actually believe it is an organizational failure to have your two most important players in franchise history in Blake and Chris Paul feel the way that they do about you and have things end the way that they did. And that doesn't mean that, CP is without fault. Obviously, there were things that had gone on. But I do hold that belief that with, Chris and Blake and even DJ hopping on that FaceTime and being able to kind of clown the organization is definitely a disappointing thing and something that I would, wish would have gone differently.
Yeah, I obviously completely agree. It really stings, as a Clipper fan that did grow up on Lob City, that our two players feel like that. You had Chris Paul posting memes after we got eliminated. I mean, that hurt. But let me ask you one last question. I know you obviously can't probably get into it too much, but we've really only heard Chris Paul's side of the story that's kind of made the Clippers look like the bad guy. I mean, it must be pretty bad that an organization would take that kind of PR hit to get rid of Chris Paul. Obviously you're not always around the guys the same way obviously the players and coaches are, but before it came around, were you able to see anything that you thought might be problematic, that maybe this is going to go south?
So there was nothing that I had seen with my own two eyes. I was a little bit confused by kind of his vibe towards the end, because it never felt like he was super warm, with what you would expect in a guy in his last season back home. But it now seems as if like this had been obviously brewing for a while, and then that kind of started to explain it for me, because when he announced his retirement officially, I think when they went back to Charlotte, he had made that post. We tried to go kind of talk to him in the locker room and just get a couple quotes, just like, hey, you said this, and he wasn't really interested in talking about it. Then obviously pretty shortly thereafter is when everything happened. But to your point, it's a very fair and reasonable and measured assessment, and probably one that, maybe from the general eye is not being talked about enough. That, yeah, obviously, is it strange that the Clippers would take such a significant PR hit, knowing full well what it would look like, and knowing that Chris is, pretty good at controlling the narrative as well, to do what they did. Does that say something? Of course it does. And, I will say this, his teammates, the guys who have come out and said positive things about him, right? Like, we asked every single player about him after this happened. I asked a lot of those questions. Kawhi had nice things to say. John Collins had nice things to say, a few other guys. None of that was made up, right? Like that wasn't like, some conspiracy, organizationally to try to like protect him. Like, he actually does have a positive relationship with a lot of his former teammates, particularly Kawhi. Like that much is true. But I do think I can say this on here, because I know it, and it's not like it's been, told to me by someone in the organization. There is a deliberate attempt and the level of intentionality on the organization's part to not burn that bridge on their end, and to not basically, quote unquote, tell their side of the story and trash arguably the greatest player in franchise history. So that much I do feel like I can say on here, that is intentional. Do they have a side of the story? Of course, they sent him home, right? Like that's not a secret, but don't expect them to start leaking stuff to ESPN or have Lawrence come out and say anything but nice things about him. I do think there's a hope that eventually his number can be in the rafters and Intuit Dome. So I think hopefully you kind of get what I'm saying there.
Absolutely. Coming up, though, going to be talking about the Clippers' direction going forward. I got to tell you a little something about Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, and your inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. I got to tell you a little something about Kalshi. The NBA playoffs are here, and it's the most electric time in basketball. And if you caught any of the game ones of the conference finals, they lived up to the hype. 2 overtime wins. And the lines are changing daily. It was 75% chance for Oklahoma City to win the conference finals before game one. Now we're looking at 50-50 after that amazing performance by Wemby. So as the playoffs heat up, the numbers move in real time and you can buy in or out anytime. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. As the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. If you want to get an ad-free version of this show, join the Everydayer Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to your team without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonclippers.supercast.com to claim your free trial. It also puts you in a members-only Discord chat with yours truly and other everyday listeners. All right, back here with Joey Linn, our beat writer, to talk about the Clippers turnaround this season. But now let's talk about how you felt about the trade deadline, the moves the Clippers made. We've talked about that. You said it on one of my vlogs, actually, that it feels like when we were 6-21, it might be time to sell high, turn things around. Well, we didn't do it with Kawhi, but we did it with James Harden and Ivica Zubac. What did you think about those trades? And also, after you tell me that, let me know how it was covering Ivica Zubac, because every single person that comes on this show that knows Zoo always has glowing reviews to say about him. I want to see if you follow in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. But to answer the first part of your question about the trade deadline, man, it was a little bit stunning, right? Because even though I had mentioned it to you on your vlog, and I think it made a lot of sense, it was a little bit blindsiding because they were kind of starting to turn already as Ty continues to give credit to James and Zoo for that turnaround, right? Like those guys were a huge part of it. It didn't just happen after the trade deadline. It was kind of in progress as it was happening. And, Kawhi, it was funny, I kept putting the quotes out there. People felt, type of way about the way that he viewed the season, where he would say, we're probably not contenders, but he had started to say we may be in a position to mess somebody's season up, right? Like that was his wording. And then now all of a sudden you trade your second and third best player, and it feels like the vibe has totally shifted. And there was a degree of that. Like I remember talking to John Collins, and he was sad. Like he loved James Harden and he loved Zoo, and as did everybody in that locker room. So it was a sad time, but I think it's a lot different when you are acquiring a two-time All-Star like Darius Garland. It feels much less like a punt on the season than it does like really what it was, a pivot toward the future while remaining competitive in the present. So I think everybody kind of understood that. It softened the blow a little bit. The team was able to still kind of rally around this belief that, hey, we can still make the postseason. So that's how I viewed it at that time, and I think it's worked out well. To answer your question about Zoo, he's awesome. One of the guys that I really became comfortable around early on when I was, 21 in NBA locker rooms for the first time and didn't really know who to talk to, like a very welcoming, just regular dude who you can chop it up with before the game. Not everybody likes talking before games, and I totally understand that. Zoo's different. He'll just be kicking it there at his chair, at his locker, and you can chop it up with him, have a good conversation. It was great seeing him when Indy came back, even though he didn't play, and, he got, some decorations in his locker, which was really neat. So, Zoo's an awesome dude, and it was cool seeing him come out supporting in the plan as well.
Absolutely. Let me ask you how you felt about his trade. Benedict Mathurin coming down, Isaiah Jackson, and the picks, which we ended up getting the 5th pick in the draft. Do you think the Clippers and their fans can feel good about, we lost a ton of picks to OKC and Philly, but we might have a path to become good again very soon?
Absolutely. You can feel good about that. And, obviously Lawrence Frank has made quite a few mistakes, and just, you can't put it all on him, right? Like it's a team of people who make these decisions. It was a team of people who made the Shea trade, and we don't have to have that conversation. But of course, you can feel good about that, and you got to give Lawrence some credit for what he was able to do with that Zoo trade specifically. And I put it out on Twitter I think it's my second to last tweet at this stage, where Lawrence was very open about the thought process behind the Zoo trade. Like, and I remember hearing rumblings of it in the locker room the night before that, like, there's a chance that this could happen. And basically what Lawrence was communicating to Zoo was that, hey, we don't want to trade you. We don't plan on trading you. We have an extremely high asking price, and there is a team that is getting close to it. And that team was, of course, the Indiana Pacers. And the Clippers were incredibly strict on the pick protections. That was really what needed to get this over the finish line was, are the Pacers going to loosen those pick protections and protect it 1 through 4 and leave 5 and 6 exposed? And ultimately, that was going to be the deal or no deal on this trade. Obviously, we know what happened, and things broke the Clippers' way there. And, I think it was a good trade. And, I love Zoo and wish him all the best in Indiana. I think he's going to be fantastic there. But I thought it was really interesting when we spoke to Lawrence after this trade, because you look at Benedict Mathurin, he had some great moments with the Clippers, some not so great moments with the Clippers, but he's a young, budding player who, kind of fits the timeline that the Clippers may be pivoting towards. So a lot of people were focused on him. But Lawrence, he didn't mean it in any disrespectful way towards Ben and towards Isaiah Jackson, but he was very open after the trade that this was about the pick compensation, right? Like, that was the holdup. That was what they were after. They wanted they really wanted 5, and they got it, but they also liked that unprotected 2031 as well. So that's what this was about. And the Clippers obviously, came out on the right end of it.
Let me ask you about the pick, right? This is something that I really respect about you, is that you don't just talk for just to talk. Given your busy schedule of covering an NBA team, because I have to do it in a different way. Did you get a chance to watch some of these guys in college? Do you have an idea of who you think we should pick? Is there anyone you prefer?
I appreciate you mentioning that, and I love the question. And I will be as honest now as I've always been. I don't pretend to know more than I do. That goes for reporting. That goes for analysis. I'll never try to tell you that I know more than I do about a player, about a situation, whatever it may be. Am I familiar with every single player who may go 5? Yes. Have I watched a ton of film since the Clippers got 5? Yes. But what I will also say is that having covered this league and having watched this league since I was a little kid, pre-draft projections, they don't always materialize in the way, honestly, I will say very rarely do they materialize in the exact way that we expect them to when it comes to who a player may become in the league. So I personally always take a little bit more of a conservative approach when saying an organization should draft this guy or shouldn't draft this guy for a particular reason, because every single year we look at the draft and there's a player who maybe got picked outside of the top 10, and you look back even a year or two later and you're like, how on earth did that guy fall? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an all-time great already, and he was able to fall to the Clippers at 13 or whatever it was in 2018. So you look at the crop of guys who are most likely to be in consideration for 5, and you can make a case for a lot of different players. I do think the Darius Garland factor is real, not in the way that the Clippers are going to draft one guy or another because of Darius Garland, but it's real in the sense of, like, that's something that's probably going to have to be reconciled, like, as early as next season when they look at how does this guy play next to the, quote unquote future point guard that we just traded for last season, right? So that's definitely a conversation worth having just among fans, media, but also something that the Clippers need to look at internally.
Yeah, coming up, we'll go more in depth about that and just talk about the Kawhi Leonard era as a whole now that we are 7 years in. I got to tell you a little something about Quo. Missed calls and slow follow-ups are silent killers for businesses. It's how money gets left on the table without people even realizing it. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo helps businesses keep every conversation organized by letting your entire team manage calls and texts from one shared number. No more drop messages, missed opportunities, or disconnected communication. It's designed for how modern businesses actually operate. And the thing that I love, it puts all the messages in one clean thread, calls and texts. The whole team can see the conversation, so nothing can fall through the cracks where one team member sees it and the other doesn't. And the AI summaries can save you serious time by logging calls and highlighting the next steps for you automatically. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. All right, back here with Clipper beat writer Joey Linn to talk about the Clippers turnaround this season, the direction of our franchise. Going back to that conversation about Darius Garland, what do you think the Clippers should do? Should we prioritize DG and look for who can fit next to him? Or do you think we just got to pick the best player available and go from there?
It's a great question. It's one, like I just alluded to, the previous segment that the Clippers are going to have to answer. And I asked Lawrence Frank, you go back and find it on his press conference at the end of the season, a pretty intentional question with this in mind, because obviously there was always going to be a chance the Clippers landed 5. And when you look at that group of players, as we've already touched on, probably going to be a guard. At least a guard is probably going to be the consensus best player available. I think that's the better way to say it. I'm not reporting anything here. That's just based on who is, consensus best player available at that spot. So I asked Lawrence Frank after the season, we saw Darius Garland. There is an organizational sense that his best basketball is ahead of him, right? Like they actually do feel that way because, he's dealt with some health issues. He's still young, and they do believe in Ty Lue's ability to unlock him a little bit more than we saw in Cleveland, particularly with the 3-point rate. We saw that go up a little bit at times, and we saw him have some really, really big moments. So there is an organizational sense that his best basketball may be ahead of him. But on the other end, and I asked Lawrence Frank this question, we saw, particularly against Portland and in the play-in against Golden State, teams deliberately going at him defensively and making him guard. And that was a problem for the Clippers. He got in foul trouble, couldn't stop players like Guy Santos and other bigger, guard/forward players who have the ability to exploit, someone like him on the defensive end. So if he is going to be your point guard of the future, do you risk drafting another similar prototype guy who may have similar issues on the defensive end at the NBA level? I don't have the answer to that question. In terms of what I would suggest and what I would, where I would lean, I would definitely lean a player with a little bit more positional versatility and size. Does that mean that that's not the best player available? I don't necessarily think that, right? Like, without saying names, I do think that when you look at this group of players, there is this belief among fans that one guy may be the best. Like, how about I will use names? Acuff may be the best player available in some fans' minds, but he may not be the best fit next to Darius Garland, whereas someone else may not necessarily be the best player available, but may be a better fit next to Darius Garland. I don't really know if that's necessarily true, right? Like, I do think the Clippers are going to take the best player available, but I wouldn't look at that pick as like, oh, the Clippers drafted this guy because he fits better next to Darius Garland. Like, I just think these organizations look at things a little bit differently than maybe fans do. And each organization values different things in what they think a player is actually going to be able to translate to the NBA level. So that's how I view it. I don't necessarily think it's as simple as like, oh, this guy fits better next to Darius Garland or this guy's the better player.
Now, let me ask you this, though, to end it off, because this Kawhi era has now it's been 7 years. Obviously, we were over the moon when we heard the news that he was coming this way. It hasn't really panned out to what we expected. This season, Kawhi was awesome, and it was unfortunate that we didn't get to see him in the postseason, given the way he played. But ultimately, there were some games towards the end of the season where Kawhi wasn't at his best. A lot of what next season's expectations are going to be for us have to do with, is Kawhi going to be on this roster? Are we going to trade him? His value's high. Do teams that fell short this year want to try to go for Kawhi now that he did have a season where he was basically fully healthy outside of those 10 games he missed? Where are you at with the Kawhi era? Would you be open to seeing another year, running it back with Ben Mathurin, Garland, if the Clippers do re-sign Ben Mathurin and have this 5th pick? Or do you think it's best to try to see what you can get and then have this 5th pick kind of develop? But, you also, that kind of leaves Darius Garland without a number 1 scoring option, which might make life harder for him as well. So where are you at with that? And what do you think the Clippers are looking at with that?
So selfishly, I love covering Kawhi. I mean, I think he's a beautiful basketball player. I mean, last season, there were games where all of us reporters were just kind of in awe at the shot making. I think he's kind of the last of a dying breed of players that you probably appreciate it, operate a little bit more in the mid-range, get to spots. Like I love that style of basketball, and not to, go a different direction with this conversation about just the style of play in the NBA today. But I personally enjoy watching him. I enjoy covering him. He's a cool dude. I would love to see, what they can build around him. And I think the organization is open to that, right? Like, of course, you got to take it with a grain of salt when Lawrence Frank says, the plan is to win with Kawhi. I've seen a few fans kind of link that quote, as like, the end all be all. Take it with a grain of salt. We know how these things go, right? He's not going to come out and say, hey, we're thinking about trading him. But, I do think there was truth to that. Like we saw how good he was last season, how available he was last season. If you draft the type of player that you think fits well around him, around Garland, the Clippers, give him a little bit of credit. Like they hit on the John Collins edition and ended up not looking so great at the beginning. He ended up being a really big piece down the stretch. Even Brook Lopez ended up contributing in the starting lineup. Like they do tend to find a way. Into a Dome helps. Steve Ballmer helps. But like they do find a way to usually add some impactful pieces when it looks like they're a little bit strapped for resources. So I do think there is a path to fielding a competitive team with Kawhi Leonard next season. Now, the flip side to that, we all watched Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. You look at those two teams. Is the best version of the Clippers next season anywhere close to the Oklahoma City Thunder or the San Antonio Spurs? My opinion, no, I don't think they are. So if there's an opportunity out there to honestly do what you did with Zoo and James to a similar degree, where you cash in on high value, you get back either players or assets that you feel really help you now and in the future for a player that, even in an ideal scenario is not here 5 years from now. I think you have to look at that. So that's how I see it. Would I like to see him on the team next season? And do I think they could field a competitive roster with him? Yes. Do I think that it's an impossibility that he has moved given where the landscape is in the Western Conference and kind of where this team has been slowly pivoting? No, that wouldn't surprise me either. And I think they would be foolish not to look at it.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the asking price for Kawhi Leonard would be right now, approximately?
Man, that's a fantastic question, because I heard a lot of different things last season when it came to this. A lot of the reporting right now that you see, I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because we see, Golden State called, this team called, this team. I heard a lot around the trade deadline that, yes, there was a level of interest, but like there also was a level of apprehension because of the looming investigation, people not knowing exactly what's going on with that. Again, I will never pretend to be more plugged in than I am. I hear a lot of stuff. I don't report a lot of stuff because a lot of it's off the record, and it's just not really my style. I may lean into that a little bit more next season, but so I'm not trying to report here, but I did hear a little bit of both around the trade deadline, that there was interest, obviously with how well he was playing and how healthy he was, but that there was apprehension from some of the teams that, a lot of people say, Detroit or this team, right? It looks like he's a perfect fit. Well, we don't know exactly how those teams feel about his situation, because, even without the aspiration thing, we don't know what's going to happen there. The health history is real, right? Like, even though he was healthy last season, it's real. And that's certainly probably not going to allow the Clippers to get top dollar when you compare his production to, what you would maybe expect to get back for a player like that. I think that's always going to be a factor in any trade discussions.
Yeah, for sure. And then my last question for you is any rumblings? It's probably being discussed, but do you think there's any chance the Clippers extend him and we extend this Kawhi era?
I cannot report on any rumblings that I know of. Again, I'm not going to pretend to know more than I do. I have not heard one way or the other, if that's a plan or not. It wouldn't, similar to what we just talked about, it wouldn't surprise me if they do try to find a way to do something similar to what they did with James. Whether or not Kawhi is down for that, that's a whole other conversation. But what I thought was interesting is that when they acquired Darius Garland, I believe he has money on the books for 27, whereas prior to that trade, I think Zoo was the only player who had money on the books for 27. And so you look at that, it wouldn't surprise me if they set something up to allow them to keep him in the mix while still angling toward that kind of 27 summer that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. But in terms of anything that I actually know concretely, whether they're talking about that, I don't.
Well, no problem. Let us know where they can find you, Joey. Great stuff as always.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I mean, Twitter, Joey Linn _ it's where I'm at. Trying to post a little bit more on Instagram during the off season. Usually I kind of go quiet on there. I have so much stuff in the archives, just like old interviews, old practice content, which people tend to enjoy. That's Joey Linn _ NBA. I'll try to post a little bit on there throughout the summer as well.
Thank you, man. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more Clipper content. And of course, Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Let's get up to 9,000 subscribers before the end of the NBA season. And of course, if you are an everyday listener and want an audio or ad-free version of this show on audio, go to lockedonclippers.supercast.com. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA. The age-old proverb continues, go Clippers.